Hello? Anybody home?
Today, I want you to open your mind.
Most come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists.
It has patterned itself after every dictator who has ever planted the ripping imprint of a boot on the pages of history since the beginning of time.
If you can get people to consent to the state of affairs in which they are living, then you have a much more easily controllable society than you would if you were relying wholly on clubs and firing squads and concentration camps.
Tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. Someone who is white is not more special than someone who is black. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
They do not want your children to be educated. They do not want you to think too much.
It was learned that the aliens had been and were then manipulating masses of people through secret societies, witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion.
They reach into our children in music, television, books.
Pray, no children's innocence.
How can I disprove lies that are stamped with an official seal?
So if you have the opportunity to stand next to one of these machines, it feels like an altar to an alien god.
Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc is now in the possession of the Army.
Too many others know what's happening out there. And no government agency has jurisdiction over the truth.
Any state, any entity, any ideology that fails to recognize the worth, the dignity, the rights of man, that state is obsolete. A case to be filed under M for mankind in the Twilight Zone.
It's about time some of you got acquainted with the real hard truth.
It's the heart that says, I will not acquiesce.
Freedom is the privilege to be right. Freedom from the disasters and from mistakes.
You don't connect the dots. It's just a mass of what's all this about.
You are listening to the Secret Teachings Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. If you'd like to contact the show tonight, you can email rdgable@yahoo.com and find the show online by searching www.tstradio.info. Tonight's broadcast, I'm not saying he's a gold digger. Kanye, Jesus, Hitler, West, the title of the broadcast. For those of you who are listening audio only, you will hear certain prompts to look at the screen. Obviously, you can ignore those. Tonight's show is broadcasting live on YouTube and X and Facebook through the Secret Teachings accounts. It is May 16th, 2025, where most of you are. It is May 17th, 2025. Where I am here in Japan, a place that Kanye West actually visited on a number of occasions and really enjoyed. Tokyo, reportedly. I started reading about Kanye West and his trips to Japan, and I'm guessing, based on what I've read, that part of the reason that he and other celebrities like coming over here is because, despite the fact that they're world famous, Japanese people tend to not annoy them or pester them and tend to not take photographs and get into their personal space. So a lot of celebrities, including Kanye, like to come over here because of that. I thought that that was interesting. It's also interesting if you visit Japan, or if you visit pretty much anywhere in the East, you'll notice that there are swastikas or svastika or manji, as it's referred to in China, you'll notice that they have manjis everywhere. You'll find them on Buddhist temples. You'll find them on miniature shrines, miniature in comparison to the larger temples. You'll find manji on clothing items. You'll find manji on books. You'll find manji in concerts. You'll find manji in a lot of different places where if it were America or Europe or Germany especially, it would be illegal. People would freak out. People would lose their minds individually and collectively just to walk down the street and see a swastika or savastika on a shrine and to see people praying in the direction of the swastika. This would shock many people from the West. Not just shock, but it would probably, to their core, rattle them so severely that their only reaction, the only way they could deal with that, would be to call those Buddhists or to call those Hindus Nazis. In fact, I've been called that many times for having any kind of book or having any kind of iconography, Hindu, Buddhist, Eastern, etc., that depicted a swastika or anything that even resembled a swastika, including the Native American whirling log. For those of you who don't know, I wrote a massive encyclopedia on occultism called Occult Arcana, and that book has a whole chapter on the cross and the whirling log and the symbols of the swastika in its various forms around the world. It's probably one of the, if not the oldest conceptual symbol in the world. And it really has nothing at all to do with what 99% of people assume it to have to do with. That might be obvious to some of you, especially as longtime listeners of the secret teachings, but a swastika is a cross. In fact, a swastika is a Christian cross. What you see on your screen is the whirling log or the whirling cross. It's a medicine wheel. And if you see this symbol and you pay attention to the lines, you'll notice not only do you have a cross, you have a cross with bent arms because the cross is turning. In one direction, it represents strength. In another direction, it represents beauty. And this particular image is a symbol of the sun as the sun turns in the sky each and every day, whether that's Ra's sun boat, which emerges in the east and crashes in the west, which is the archetype of the flying disc UFO, which emerges and then crashes, and we go to recover the pieces to preserve it. And we do that in the iconography that we have in religious and mythological symbolism. We also do that in the ufological community. We try to find the pieces of it and preserve it because the UFOs give us things like Velcro, right? And lasers, and they give us things that we read about in the Roswell mythology. In the same way the sun's rays give us light and warmth and life. The same things that Jesus gives us, the same things that the number one goddess of Japan gives us. That is Amaterasu, the sun goddess of Iset Jingu, which shares a relationship to Isa, the Arabic for Jesus, and Isa, as in the Giza Plateau, the womb of Isis or Isis, the Greek name for the Egyptian goddess of birth and life. All of that comes out of this symbol called the swastika. And no matter how political you make the swastika, no matter how many times you try to redefine the swastika, for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years on planet Earth, that symbol has always represented the sun, has always represented life, has always represented the four corners of the earth, the four elements and the four elementals. It has always represented those things. Even if we were to use it as a political symbol for another 500 years, that particular symbol will still represent the sun. It will still represent the elements. And this is important. This is a really powerful thing to grasp and to understand. For those of you who have not studied mythology or theology or history, you might find this story interesting either way. But for those of you who have not studied this, maybe you've never thought of something like this, because I doubt that anybody listening to this show is so silly, let's say. But I had somebody accuse me when I was in film school of being a Nazi, and their evidence was that I dared to have religious iconography. And I said, this symbol is from a Buddhist shrine or a Buddhist temple. And I said that these swastikas, or a variation of them, one direction or the other, are all over India. And I was told the reason for that was, and this is being told to me, who was advanced, I was not very good in school, but I was advanced placement history, and I was really good with just all kinds of history, especially American Revolution, but all kinds of history. And I had this person tell me that the Nazis invaded India and spread the swastika all over India. And I didn't know if they were joking. I guess I was a little naive, and I kind of laughed like, you serious? Oh yeah, they said, yes, the Nazis invaded India. You know, the term Nazi it's a cartoon. It's a caricature of something. If you think about what a Nazi is, Bernie Sanders is a Nazi. And automatically people would say he can't be a Nazi, he's Jewish. Well, that has nothing to do with it. A Nazi is a National Socialist. Bernie Sanders is a National Socialist. I'm pretty sure Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also a National Socialist. She's an actual literal Nazi. But we redefine these terms. First of all, you have a term that's reduced. National Socialist becomes Nazi. And then Nazi becomes Jew hater. And then Nazi becomes a term that we use to discredit people that we don't agree with, that we don't like, or just a term that we use because we don't know what we're talking about. So it's much easier just to level and assert some sort of accusation at somebody rather than actually having a discussion with them. Because when you say that word, the room clears out. As some say, it's like dropping the H-bomb. You say Hitler, the room clears out. Or you get the opposite extreme where people are like, yeah, I like Hitler. And then you have to ask them, well, why do you like Hitler? Why do you dislike Hitler? And it's one of those issues, one of those subjects, one of the only subjects that you're not really allowed to even if you were to peddle the mainstream narrative, the algorithm doesn't care. The AI doesn't care. It looks for certain symbols and listens for certain things and videos online and audio and might pull it, even if you're repeating the mainline historical narratives. So you have to be very careful when you're doing things like broadcasting to X or broadcasting to YouTube. That is, with just those particular things, because the pornography and the digital prostitution and the OnlyFans and the violence and the fighting and the racial conflict that's created via the out of context videos and the sock puppet accounts and the bots and the way that the algorithm is designed to promote and push these kinds of things, all of that is acceptable. You can get online and you can give money to some woman who called some guy a bad word, called some child the N-word. Oh, it's so horrible. And she makes $1 million. And I'm sitting back like most of you thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? Maybe I should go call a little kid a bad word and maybe people will give me money. That whole thing was probably staged, I would think. And that becomes really popular. But if you talk about Hitler, suddenly you're not allowed to have that open platform. Suddenly you're not allowed to have that discussion. Even if you're reading from mainline historical texts, because there's a monopoly on this subject. That's what it is. It's a monopoly. It's an industry, actually. And King of the Hill pointed this out many years ago. Great show, King of the Hill, where they're watching television and all you hear from the History Channel is Hitler's insert an unlimited amount of different things, unlimited number of things. Hitler's tanks, Hitler's suits, Hitler's secret police, Hitler's concubines, Hitler's underwear, I think it's Llewellyn, she says, wow, that Hitler guy did a lot of stuff. He had a lot of things. You never hear that about Stalin. You never hear that about Mao. You never hear that about Pol Pot. You never hear that about really anybody else. It's just all Hitler. And then you look up basic encyclopedic search, like statistically, historically verifiable. Who killed, if you had to classify this, who killed the most people in the 20th century? And you would find that the Chinese said, hold my beer, and they took it to a new level. The Chinese killed 40-something million via starvation just through poor management of a planned economy. They killed another 20-something million through the Cultural Revolution, which included tearing down statues and making words illegal and putting trigger warnings on products. That's not an exaggeration. They literally did the same things that you've seen happen today in the Western world. All of that happened in China. 60-something million. That's a conservative estimate. Stalin killed 30-something million. I mean, not personally, but the Holodomor alone was 9 million. And of course, you had the flight and expulsion of the Germans at the end of the war. Not so many of them died, but 14 million of them were displaced. You had the 200,000 to 300,000 conservative that were slaughtered at Dresden, who were all civilians. You had the 40% of Tokyo that was burned to the ground through experimental napalm-like substances, and that was before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which were both civilian targets. Despite the fact that Japan had lost the war, they knew they lost the war. The leadership refused to give up and give in. So instead of killing the leadership, which was a small number of people, they decided to kill largely civilians because they had to test these bombs and to see what would the results be of dropping such weapons and the radiation and all of that. That's what Hiroshima and Nagasaki, I think, were. They were experiments. And just on that basis alone, you can't say that Hitler was the most evil person in the world or suggest that Mengele was the worst human experimenter that the world's ever seen. That's just not true. I mean, at the very least, nobody's really the good guy. Nobody's really the bad guy. It's all just kind of either neutral or it's all kind of bad. And that's why when you study history and you learn constantly and obsessively about one particular event, it just doesn't make any sense why that one particular event, and we're not going to talk about this in detail tonight, but the groundwork needs to be laid before we can address Kanye West, before we can address his new song, before we can address the backlash about the song, the response about the song. That one particular event is like even mainline history about World War II. There's a monopoly. In fact, a Jewish author named Norman Finkelstein wrote a book about it. He called it the Holocaust industry, in the same way that there's a Hitler industry. Going back to King of the Hill, there's a Hitler industry. And only certain people can say certain things about Hitler. Even if they're factually true, there's a monopoly on who can talk about those things. There's a monopoly on who can say those things. There's a monopoly on who can speak and who cannot speak. And that's really, really scary. It's really powerful to recognize that what we're dealing with is a very controlling, a very powerful and very controlling shadowy force that no matter what the issue is, you can call a little kid the N-word and people will promote it and give you money on social media. You can twerk your naked butt on Twitter and it will be promoted. You can just put pornographic videos on X and it's totally fine. You can criticize anybody and everybody. You can call one group the worst possible name you can think of, and they can call you the worst possible name you can think of, and so on. But there's one group that you're unable to criticize without the wrath of Yahweh coming down on you. And in fact, things have gotten so out of control in the United States. And again, if you're just joining us, this relates directly to Kanye West, and we need to understand this before we go into the story completely. For those of you who have not been following my show, I did a broadcast on how Easter, the Easter story, is actually illegal in the United States, according to the State Department and according to the Department of Homeland Security and according to the IHRA definition of what constitutes anti-Semitism. And I did an entire episode on that where I showed you the documentation from Congress. I showed you the documentation. I showed you the documentation from the DHS and from the State Department. So we don't need to go into all of those details again now. But under the definition of anti-Semitism that the State Department has adopted for a couple of decades now, the story of Jesus is actually illegal in the United States. It would be illegal under that definition of anti-Semitism. And I want to show you something else because it sounds hard to believe, but you need to see this before we go into Kanye West. This is recent. This is May 14th. This is a resolution that the United States Congress, the House, agreed to and passed. It's House Resolution 352, calling on elected officials and civil society leaders to counter anti-Semitism and educate the public on the contributions of the Jewish American community. Now, this is taking issues of race and related subjects and pushing it to the extreme. It's one thing to have a Black History Month or a Gay Pride Month, which seems to ironically kind of multiply every other month as Gay Pride Month. This is different. This is the U.S. Congress agreeing with almost a unanimous vote that the American public needs to be educated about the Jewish community. And if you read the resolution, it's not incredibly long. It's all about anti-Semitism and October 7th, which rewrites the historical narrative. It's all about how Jews need to be basically coddled and protected, and they need special protections as opposed to other groups of people. The House of Representatives calls on elected officials, faith leaders, and civil society leaders to condemn and counter all acts of anti-Semitism, which of course they define as reading the Bible. That's literal. I'm considering pulling all of that up because it sounds unbelievable. Calls on the executive branch and state and local leaders to educate the public on the contributions of the Jewish American community and uplift Jewish stories and voices. And the House of Representatives takes all possible steps to ensure the safety, security, and dignity of American Jews, not Americans, American Jews, in all aspects of their lives, including the workplace, college, and university campuses, synagogues, and at home. No mention of the Arab or Muslim community that has been, since 9/11, the target of some of the most vile and disgusting racism and anti-religious sentiment that I think I've ever seen in all of my study of history and the horrible things that humans have done. Like the terrible things that we say and talk about in regard to Muslims and Arabs is despicable on a level that makes me kind of want to throw up and makes me kind of want to vomit. And ironically, many of the things that they're accused of are many of the things that, well, there are other people that are actually responsible for those very things. So understanding all of that is really important to understanding the Kanye West story, whether it's what we began with, which is the swastika, or it's the definition of anti-Semitism, or it's understanding the historical context and why certain things are accepted and other things are considered off limits. When we're talking about World War II, we're talking about Hitler. You know, if you were to make a song called Heil Stalin, and the song lyrics went something like this, they went like, They don't understand the stuff I say on Twitter. Heil Stalin, Heil Stalin. That song would be played at every college liberal university from west to east, north to south. It'd be the number one song of college campuses. It would be probably the number one song in the world. People would love Heil Stalin. If you had another one called Heil Mao, we could just make a whole long list of these songs. They don't understand the stuff I say on Twitter. Heil Mao, Heil Mao, Mao. You know, that would be okay. That would be acceptable. And nobody can seem to explain why that is. Oh, you have to understand the Holocaust was unique. What was unique about it? There's nothing unique about the Holocaust of Jews any more than there's anything unique about the expulsion of the Germans or the murder of tens of millions of Chinese or, well, the internment camp set up for the Japanese in America, the stripping of their rights, the freezing of Japanese assets, the prompting of Pearl Harbor, the allowing of Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Tokyo, the bombing of Hiroshima, the bombing of Nagasaki, the bombing of Dresden, which was an actual Holocaust because a Holocaust is the mass death by fire. That's what the definition of the word is, mass death by fire. And that's what happened at Dresden, where they killed 200,000-300,000 civilians. And if you don't believe me, because, I mean, don't take my word for it, this is the dictionary definition of a Holocaust, a great destruction resulting in the extensive loss of life, especially by fire. So what exactly makes this issue so volatile? What exactly makes this issue such a problem when otherwise anywhere in the East that I've gone, I went to 7-Eleven. They sold books on Hitler at 7-Eleven. There's swastikas on temples all over the place over here. And yes, those are religious symbols and those are history books. We have a completely different interpretation of those things in the West. And I don't think it's a natural or organic interpretation. I think it's a programmed interpretation. I think it's a indoctrination is what I think it is. And part of that is the industry. There's a Holocaust industry. There's a Hitler industry. There are other things that you can talk about with no issue at all, but there are certain things that are considered very, very, people say controversial. I don't think it's a matter of controversy. I think it's a matter of free speech. I thought it was kind of funny this week. I was reading about how the State Department was very, very concerned, so concerned with free speech in America. And I thought, is that the same State Department that defines anti-Semitism as reading the Bible, which is the First Amendment, religious and speech? Is that the same State Department that strips visas away from students for writing letters? Talk about free speech, and that's a matter of protest and publication. Certain kinds of free speech are an issue for certain kinds of people, like the political right. And certain kinds of speech are issues for the political left, right? Like, because racism is a public health crisis for the Democrats, anti-Semitism is a public health crisis for the conservatives. I know it's hard to believe a lot of the stuff that I'm saying. So if you're watching, I'll just pull these up for you. This is from our Easter is Illegal broadcast on YouTube, but you can find them on our Spreaker page, Apple, Spotify, etc. Which, by the way, if you're listening on Apple, please leave us a review. Here's the State Department website, their definition of anti-Semitism. Pause the video if you need to read it. Here's as per the State Department, the IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, working definition of anti-Semitism, which includes story of Jesus. This is just historical fact. And here's the Department of Homeland Security. And here is the Department of Justice. By the way, it's not just this particular issue, because now we have the Department of Justice telling the state of Washington that they cannot force priests to report cases of sex or child or any kind of other abuses or things of that nature. And the church actually says, hey, we work with the DOJ on this. We'll just excommunicate you from the church. So without going into any further detail about that, tonight's show is about Kanye West, but like all other episodes of the Secret Teachings, it is necessary, it is important, it is critical to analyze these other historical details or the definitions of words, because if we don't do that, then we're entering into a controversial conversation without any kind of terms or definitions. We don't know what we're talking about, in other words. I'll show you tonight that to use the word Nazi, it has nothing to do with Jews. It has everything to do with a political ideology. In the same way that using the word fascism has nothing to do with Jews or has nothing to do with some exclusive form of tyranny. It's just a merger of corporations and government, at least according to the person who coined it. But these terms have literal definitions, like what they actually mean, and then they have cultural definitions, which are controlled by the narrative. It's controlled by the monopoly that is held on these things. There's a slavery industry, there's a Holocaust industry, there's a Hitler industry. And by industry, I mean it's an industry. They make a lot of money. There's museums and books and documentaries and so on and so forth. It just goes on and on and on, as if one particular group of people are more important than the rest of us. Like when the state of South Dakota passed a specific law to protect a percentage of the population which is almost invisible on a chart. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, Virtual Jewish Encyclopedia, South Dakota has about 700, 800 Jews that live in the whole state. That state took their time in drafting a law to specifically protect those individuals when, sure, Jews should be protected, but they're protected under the Constitution. And that applies to states. It applies federally. You don't need special laws for special groups of people. And then you have to understand one last thing before we open up the Kanye can, and that is when we define terms such as Jewish. Well, we're not talking about one group of people. We're talking about everybody. We're talking about all people. Everybody is Jewish, and you don't have to be born into a certain group to be Jewish. And the Bible says this. If you read the book of Romans says this. It also says that circumcision is not a literal circumcision. It's a circumcision of the heart, in the same way that the infidel, that we hear this word infidel, the Muslims want to kill the infidels. Well, infidel also means Muslims from a Christian point of view. It also means Hindus from a Christian point of view, or Buddhists from a Muslim point of view. It means people that don't share your faith. That's what the word means. Just like Allah just means God. Infidel simply means that someone doesn't share your faith. That's it. And that doesn't even have to be religious faith. That could be your faith in something else that has nothing to do with religion. An infidel ultimately is the carnal self, because the true self, the true faith, is the soul. And the carnal self, all of those desires, the sexual desires, the desires for excessive consumption of food and pleasure and whatnot, those types of things are carnal in nature, meaning that these types of things are actually the lesser self or the lower self. And when you can decapitate that infidel in the jihad, which is the holy war, the spiritual battle inside of you, that struggle, which is what Israel means, then you transcend it and you become enlightened and born again, as the Christians say, and you follow that middle path of Allah, Buddha, Krishna, Shinto, and so on and so forth. And you become a son or daughter of God rather than a son or daughter of man. This is embedded in these words: Israel, Jew, infidel, jihad, and so on and so forth. In the same way that the Holy Land is a physical place inside of you and a spiritual place inside of you. The Holy Land is a state of mind, not a geographical location. When you understand these things, then the whole narrative just kind of falls apart. But there are a few that would want to even consider such a thing because it would change their entire identity. It would change everything that they think that they are, everything that they defend and support. You can see Romans 2:28 through 29 on your screen right now if you'd like to read that. You can also read this interesting Sanhedrin 59a entry by Rabbi Yohanan that talks about how the Torah, those important books of the Bible, are actually off limits to Gentiles, that they belong specifically to Jews under the command of Moses, and they are inherited by Jews and Jews only, and Christians, or anybody, they don't say Christians, just anybody, Gentiles who have them, are liable to receive the death penalty because they don't belong to those people. Now, if you want to get into a discussion about individual interpretations and specific groups and identities and messianic this, and that's for another show. I'm simply trying to paint a picture and define our terms and create a base so that we have a general idea of what we're talking about. And as per the conversation in the chat room coming in through X and Facebook and mostly YouTube, I believe, I saw some people ask a question that I'm going to answer by showing you another image. And it's a really important image. In fact, it kind of redefines history type of an image. And that is the image. I think I can pull this up. Maybe I'll have to, I will have to open up another tab to do this. Here is the image. Pull this up on the screen right now. This is what happened before we ever had a Second World War. There was one particular group of people that declared war on Germany. Oh, it's fake. No, it's not. It's real. The entire international Jewish community called for a boycott of Germany. Part of that had to do with the British, but this is not necessarily the point of tonight's show, although it is an important factor to consider with the rest of what we have to talk about. So we'll pause for just one moment. I'll let you know that you're listening to the Secret Teachings. This is a live Friday night broadcast, YouTube, X, Facebook. Unfortunately, I cannot do this all the time because if I just do the show for free, as you can imagine, there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into this. Then, of course, I would not have an ability to pay the streaming bill or to pay anything because it would just be given away free. So the show is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday via Spreaker, which sends the show out to Spotify, Apple, etc. You listen to the ads. That supports us and pays us. You can also leave that stream on and let the show play all night. You don't have to listen to it, and that will also financially support us. Download the shows, share the shows, leave us a review on Apple. Lots of ways you can support us for free. It doesn't cost you anything. But if you'd like the show, if you really want to support us directly, we have a very cheap membership that gets you access to the ad-free show, montages, digital books, the archive of documents, etc., depending on what tier you select. And that's on our website at tstradio.info. That's tstradio.info. If you visit the website, you will see that, as well as our books. All the books I've wrote, I've actually just shrunk down the size of a couple of them in terms of the printing to make them cheaper, which helps you and helps me. And maybe you'll check out the books. Maybe you'll subscribe to the show, tstradio.info. There's also a Cash App option, and this is a little secret, so don't tell anybody. But in the link below on YouTube, you will find a personal PayPal link that I have. My PayPal was shut down, but there's a PayPal link there, so that's another option if you want to subscribe to the Secret Teachings. Okay, so now, without further ado, 40 minutes into the show, we can now begin to address Kanye West. I've been asked by 4 or 5 listeners to do this show. I've been asked by a couple of other listeners why I haven't done this show. And I've been asked by some listeners to talk about certain things that I don't necessarily find relevant about Kanye. Some people wanted me to do kind of like a review of his Heil Hitler song. I don't personally want to do that because, I see the content on social media. I see the content on YouTube and people reviewing the song. And, they have, their head in the bottom corner and then the song's playing and they're like bobbing along. They're like, oh man, that was hot. That was real cool. I like that. Or I don't like that. This guy's crazy. I don't like that kind of content. I think it's clickbaity. I think it's clouty. I think it's cash grabbing. I don't like that. I think it's cheap. We've spent 40 minutes of, I think, borderline college level education just to understand the bottom line the foundation before we can even address the Kanye issue. These issues require more than clicks. They require more than a talking point. They require more than a 10-second TikTok video. People ask me, why don't you make a TikTok video? Because I can't summarize 5 hours in 5 seconds. It's impossible. There's nobody, even AI can't summarize the complexity of these issues into even a 30-second clip. You just can't do it. You can't do it. You cannot do it. So this show is long form. I want to thank all of you who join us throughout the week and listen to the entirety of the broadcast. So Kanye West, who is Kanye West? What is this Kanye West story that has unfolded over the last decade, but especially over the last couple of years? There's an angle on Kanye West that I think is kind of like a pot of gold at the end of a proverbial rainbow, and it's remained untouched. People are not addressing this issue. I've not seen this talked about anywhere. Before Kanye's new song, Heil Hitler, which the usual figures dislike and the usual figures support, the people that dislike it, they just ban it from like every platform. And the people that really like it, and there's a handful of individuals, but I'm going to try to be neutral tonight, but there's a handful of individuals who are really big names that think it's just glorious and it's a masterclass in trolling and it's wonderful. And it might be a little bit of that, but frankly, I don't care. I think it's catchy. But that's about it. I don't really care. I mean, frankly, I grew up listening to Kanye West. I never really liked his music. Some stuff is like catchy, but it's just not my style. I do like hip hop music or some R&B. But I not really much anymore, but I just never really like Kanye's stuff. But I also think Kanye West has every right in the world to release a song called Heil Hitler. I think he has a right to release a song called I Don't Like Jews. I think he has a right to release a song called I Don't Believe the Holocaust happened, or at least the Jewish Holocaust. Not only do I think he has that right, he inherently has that right. Everybody has that right. Now, how the public responds to that, how the public community, the public space, how the marketing around your product responds, that's totally different. But you have a right to say those things. You have a right to believe those things. We don't want to be like Germany, where having his song in Germany played is actually illegal. Did you know that? Playing Heil Hitler in Germany is illegal. It's illegal. Why? Well, you know why. I don't have to tell you why. I don't have to explain why, but his song is illegal in Germany, just like the swastika is, which I always wondered, if I were a Buddhist and I always wore some sort of Buddhist imagery, I don't know, like usually Buddhists they don't display themselves very much, although if you see some Buddhist temples over here, a lot of the Buddhist monks are not really Buddhists. They're driving around in nice sports cars, supposed to renounce all that. But if I was to go to Germany and I was to wear a swastika, even if it was backwards, I'd be arrested. I mean, how does your right to practice your religion fare in Germany? In fact, how does it fare in the United States? There are a lot of Buddhists in the United States, but I was wondering if I was like a Buddhist, like a real Buddhist in the U.S., and I walked around with that image on. I wonder how you can't kick me out of a store. Isn't that religious discrimination to be kicked out of a store or be denied service because I have a swastika and I'm a Buddhist? Just something to think about. But Kanye's song is banned in Germany. It's banned pretty much on every single platform. And ironically, the immediate banning of this song essentially proves the point that Kanye's been making for a couple of years now, that there's a powerful group of people that control the image and the idea of not only certain historical characters and narratives, but also of people that look like Kanye West, people with dark skin. There's a very powerful lobby and a very powerful group of entertainers and institutions that control the identity and the image not only of Hitler and not only of the swastika, but also of the black man and the black woman. And Kanye is right about that. In fact, he might be the most right about that particular issue. But let's be objective about Kanye, because rather than praising him as, oh, he's a Nazi, it's so cool, it's so edgy, and rather than demeaning him because, oh, he's a Nazi, it's so horrible, how about we be objective about Kanye? Heil Hitler, that song is absolutely ripe for picking. There's no doubt about that. But before Heil Hitler, he was pushing an adult film company. Remember that? Remember this Hitler lover was a big fan of pornography prior to the release of this song. And if you know anything about Hitler, Hitler didn't like pornography. In fact, the Nazis banned this kind of material, like smut, porn, the kinds of things that the Weimar Republic was famous for. Very famous. Smut, pornography, transgenderism, 1924, first transgender surgery, Berlin, Magnus Hirschfeld and the Institute of Sexual Science. Yes, he was Jewish. They were giving pornography to kids, and not just any pornography, the worst hardcore pornography that you can imagine. And even if you look at some of the images of the so-called book burning, you'll find that a lot of the books, magazines, were actually smut. And despite the fact that there was a pretty large opposition to pornography and these kinds of things during the Weimar years, you'll read stories about how Hitler actually had the porn obsession that the people who he targeted actually had. In the same way that they say Hitler had a weird penis, but it was actually Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein who reportedly, based on what the victims said, had a weird, I think, egg-shaped penis or some bizarre deformed penis. But they said, no, Hitler had the weird penis. They get rid of porn. No, Hitler had the porn addiction, not the people that ran Weimar Germany. They didn't have the porn addiction. Just Hitler had the porn addiction. So if you look at some of these images, Nazis burning books, you'll actually find that there are pornographic or semi-pornographic material that you can see in the images. It's kind of amazing that that fact has been kind of overlooked. Kind of like just, it's right there on the surface. And I don't know why nobody, like, maybe it's one of those things like that. Remember that gorilla experiment where the gorilla walks through the group of people playing basketball, and you don't see the gorilla because you're told to focus on how many times the basketball is passed, and then you get down to the last little scene, and they rewind it. And what you see is the gorilla walk through, but you didn't see the gorilla because you were focused on the basketball passing. It's kind of like that with these images. Here, I'll give you an example because it sounds hard to believe, and I like giving examples. Here's an example. I don't know if YouTube would get upset that I put this on the screen, but you can zoom in here where you see the cursor. You can zoom in here where you see the cursor. See, that's what the Nazis were actually burning. Smut, porn, things that were peddled to children, transgenderism, the kinds of things that we're dealing with today. It's magical how history repeats itself, and how the people who are opposed to giving children that kind of smut and who are opposed to men coming into the bathrooms with their daughters are the same kinds of people that we accuse these Germans. They're horrible Nazis and evil. Well, probably. Like, I'm not a Nazi. I'm not a National Socialist. I think that's preposterous. And I don't think that we even define the term correctly. But if burning pornography and smut, it makes you a Nazi, then a lot of conservatives wouldn't. Yes, they would indeed be Nazis. But you see the evidence of that there. Just one little piece of proof. You can zoom in and see. And by the way, images like that are why I'm not monetizing YouTube, because I'm not going to monetize the video just to have everything taken down because I showed you something that was from the National Archives or something that was from the White House website or something that was a historical fact. But anyway, here is Kanye West with his porn company. He wanted to create a porn company. He's a big fan of porn. And he had said, oh, he stopped watching porn. And then he says, oh, I like porn. Kanye West announces Yeezy Porn amid reports of adult film company. This was, I think, after he did the interview with InfoWars where he talked about how he broke his porn addiction. And here's Kanye West wanting some porn, which would have been contrary to pretty much anything that would be historically considered like original early 30s Nazism. Would have been opposed to all of this. If you read Gable, there's a book called Gable. Read that book, or The Myth of German Villainy, and you'll see all the evidence you need to see. The photographs, the posters, the propaganda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, now before Hitler was praised by Kanye West, he has this idea to have a porn company. Before that, you might remember, some of you might remember me saying this, he was a big fan of Jesus. And he still kind of uses, the Jesus motif. He was a big fan of Jesus. And when I heard that he was a fan of Jesus, he loved Jesus, and Jesus is King. Remember he released that album, Jesus is King, which now has been, memed into Christ is King, which has been exploited by many people on the political right, probably political left too. But Christ is King, or Jesus is King, which is the Kanye album, is kind of in contrast likewise to his even earlier works, where he kind of said that he was Jesus. I don't know if you remember that, but Kanye has said all kinds of things. There's a really great bit by Bill Burr, the comedian, where he says, he's watched this guy, and he said he came home, his wife's watching TV, and they're talking about Kanye, and he's like, Kanye just says stuff. He's like, I'm a genius, I'm Jesus, I'm God. Yeah, he's pretty close to certifiably insane, not because of the Hitler stuff, but because of the I'm Jesus, I'm God. And he's not the only one, because Jay-Z does the same thing. In fact, most very successful, wealthy, influential, powerful people, once you get enough money and enough influence and power, and at some point, what do you do with that power? And eventually you start to think, maybe I am God. I am the golden God. Maybe you start thinking that. Maybe you start thinking, if you've watched Sunny in Philadelphia, Dennis is the golden God, but he's also, as the series goes on, they find out he's not really, he wasn't really popular, didn't really get all the women he said. He's delusional. Yeah, these people like Kanye and Jay-Z, I think they're delusional. Now, for the record, I do like Kanye way more than Jay-Z. Jay-Z, I think, is a totally different creature. But this whole historical Kanye West it's weird to me because, yeah, you can evolve as an artist. I've evolved here on radio over 15 years. You can evolve. In fact, you should evolve. You should change, not because you should, but because you have the ability. You should be able to acknowledge that sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I get things incorrect, and you can move on, and you can learn something about yourself, and people, maybe they trust you more because you can say, well, hey, I was wrong about that. Let's look at it again and address it. And this is why I was duped. So even Fox Mulder on the X-Files in the new seasons admitted that he was duped by a government conspiracy about government conspiracies. We can be duped. We can be manipulated. We can all, of course, just naturally change our opinions too. All right. So is that what it is? You go from like, I'm God, to I love Jesus, to I'm going to start a porn company, to Heil Hitler. How does that transition take place? And remember, if it was Heil Stalin, it would just be another level or another coat of paint in the Kanye ego, Kanye identity. But because it's Hitler, there's like a hard stop. It's like, you're Jesus, that's okay. Now you love Jesus, and you're not Jesus, but you love Jesus, that's okay. And then you want to do porn, that's okay. But then now you Heil Hitler. No, that's the cutoff. The cutoff is Hitler. You can say things about Jesus. I even thought mocking Jesus, because he uses the term Jesus, which is a slang term for the Antichrist. So I don't think that he's really truly a Christian. But then again, I guess what exactly is a Christian? Frankly, I don't think Russell Brand is a Christian either. And I think that Russell Brand is kind of actually a really good example of what I'm getting at here. I don't really care one way or the other if Russell Brand is guilty of rape and the things he's been accused of, nor do I care if Andrew Tate is either. I think he's subhuman as far as I'm concerned, Andrew Tate is. But Russell Brand, I mean, some of the stuff he's done is funny. He's acted. I've listened to some of his comedies. Can be a pretty funny guy. He's a smart guy. He's got that accent, so even if wasn't smart, he would sound smart. But he said he was, quote, lit up with the Holy Spirit. Did you hear that? He was lit up with the Holy Spirit after making bail on his rape and assault trial. And I've noticed that there's been a trend in this direction for a while. A lot of people on the political right, or people that kind of take the conspiracy approach. And I've noticed radio people have done this for years, which always got on my nerves. People who I knew weren't actually Christians, or who I knew were not actually really in love with Jesus, but they would start or end their radio shows with statements like, God bless you. God bless you all for being here. Jesus, I want to take a moment to thank Jesus. Jesus, you're my Lord and Savior. And I'm like, you're not a Christian. What are you doing? Oh, well, this is this is what the audience likes. It's like, oh, so you're just playing a part. You're playing a role. It's fake. I learned that early on. And so I know that small, low level, even let's say local, for all intents and purposes, nobodies do that kind of stuff. I don't have any doubt in my mind that Russell Brand's or Kanye West's wouldn't at least consider that kind of thing. Especially because if you're making music, I ain't saying she a gold digger. You're tapping into one particular market. And then one day you realize, oh, wait, there's 2 billion Christians in the world. That's a pretty big market to tap into. And then you tap into it. And then suddenly there's this avalanche of cash because you have a new market. I mean, I could be a sellout. I could do the same thing. God bless you, my children. Thank you so much for coming to my show. But see, then I would be a piece of shit to do that. That's why I have no problem telling you, I believe in Jesus. I just don't think Jesus was the physical Son of God. I think Jesus was a physical person. I don't think that was his name. I think it was a title, just like Messiah, just like Christ. It also applied to Krishna, the Christos in India, which is where much of the Jesus story comes from, India and Persia, which is modern day Iran, which makes Christianity technically an Eastern religion. The Buddhist story is actually very similar to the Jesus story, very similar to the Mithras story, but I think that there's value in Christianity. And if I tell you that, yes, you should give me money now, because if I tell you that I love Jesus, then that means I'm on your team. And if I tell you not the opposite, but I tell you something else, like, yeah, I respect it, and I don't think that Christians should be persecuted, and you have a right to practice Christianity. If I tell you that, but I'm not a Christian, then people don't want to give me money. That doesn't feed the egos of the people that, I guess, have faith, let's say. And hey, the same thing goes for any other group for that matter. I practice Shinto, but I'm not really religious. I'm not really spiritual. It's just a way of life. Like Buddhism is actually just kind of like a way of life. So when I talk about Christianity in regard to Russell Brand or Kanye West, I don't really care one way or the other. Of course, people can change their minds. Of course, people can look at the world differently. Of course, people can decide, I'm not gonna just have sex with a bunch of random women and have them lick my bottom spot. This is referencing Russell Brand. And talking about 3 ways where girls eat his ass and how he wants to have sex with his cat because that's somehow funny. I don't think that's funny. And then he, you know, was famously a rabid drug consumer. And then I'm supposed to believe he just gave all that up at his age and decided, oh, I'm going to be a Christian now. And then suddenly starts tapping into that Christian market of Christian conservative values and the New World Order. And I'm sorry, I don't believe it. If he's a Christian, okay, great, but I don't believe it. And that's the same question I have about Kanye. I don't know if I believe it. I don't know. I just don't think it's one thing to be a druggie and to be a sex fiend and then to turn your life over to Jesus. That almost is more believable than I'm God, I'm a genius, I'm literally Jesus Christ. And then the next day, actually, I love Jesus, I'm not Jesus. Like, to me, that's weird. To me, I think what happened was probably, frankly, some person with a yarmulke on came to Kanye and said, look, Kanye, or I could do the whole thing. Kanye, look, man, we gotta tap into this Christian audience, man. There's 2 billion of these Christians. We can milk them. We can take all the money, Kanye. We can tap into this market, Kanye. We just got to Jesus. How about Jesus is King? That's a good title. You know, just that slimy, disgusting Jewish caricature, which Kanye's right about, does run the music industry and OnlyFans and Tinder and Grindr and Bumble and also Pornhub. That's true. So whatever Kanye is, or whatever the reason is for his transition, the fact is Heil Hitler is not really the height of his insanity. I think he's actually come down off of the ledge because when you start off with I'm God, I think that's kind of the maximum. And then when you get down to Heil Hitler, I don't really think that's if you're claiming to be God, I mean, that's the top. You can't go any higher than that. That's the top of Mount Sinai. Okay, so it's not that a person cannot or should not embrace a new faith, but that sometimes these conversions are really, really suspicious. In Kanye's previous work, like his 2013 album Yeezus, he performs a song called I Am God. And he has repeatedly referred to himself as a genius or likened himself to Jesus or God in the past as well. The nickname Yeezus is obviously derived from Jesus, and Yeezy inspired by, get this, Jay-Z. Do you know Jay-Z's nickname? Jehovah. Jay-Z has a nickname, Jehovah, which is short for Jehovah. That's God. It's actually a moon god, but that's God. That would be the God of the Muslims. That would be Allah because the moon god. But that's Jehovah, the name of God. Did you know that? I didn't know that before tonight's show. I was looking up what inspired Yeezy, and Jay-Z inspired Yeezy because Jay-Z took on the name Jehovah, as in Jehovah. So you got two guys that are like, I'm God, I'm Jehovah, I'm the best human ever. I'm number one. And excuse me for thinking that they're anything but crazy for that and not because of the Heil Hitler stuff, at least in the case of Kanye West. But this is also the same Jay-Z who, alongside of Sean Diddy Combs, has been accused of rape and some other really horrible things. A lot of rappers nowadays point out the horrible things that Beyonce and Jay-Z have been accused of or maybe have been witness doing. Jay-Z was obviously very much a part of the Diddy scandal. And I'll say this again later. Do you think it's weird that with Diddy and his trial ongoing, that instead of talking about that, we're talking about Heil Hitler? Anybody think that's suspicious or weird? You know, the rape and the sex trafficking and the abuse and all the terrible things that probably were a lot worse than some pink cocaine and baby oil. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But that probably can't hold a candle to Epstein, or it's part of the same intelligence operation. And rather than discuss that, we're going to talk about, oh my God, Kanye said something about Hitler. I mean, hell, I've been accused of praising Hitler. Why? Because I said, literally, this is all I said. I said, yeah. Someone asked me what movie I've seen. I said, yeah, I saw Dunkirk recently. I thought it was pretty accurate how Christopher Nolan, my favorite director and one of my favorite writers, Christopher Nolan says in the movie, historically accurate, facts. He puts historically accurate facts in there that all those soldiers on the beach, Hitler could have killed them all. And he decided to not do that because he wanted an alliance with the British to go into the Soviet Union. He kept asking for peace over and over and over and over and over again, just like he did at the beginning. Now that we're translating all those angry German speeches into English, and we're like, oh, that doesn't actually sound very crazy at all. I asked for peace 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Oh, that makes a lot of sense now. Doesn't make him a good guy, but it just means that history is not what we've been led to believe it is. And all I said was, I like the historical accuracy of Dunkirk. And this person reported me to the manager and said Ryan was in the back, quote, glorifying Hitler. So you don't really have to do anything except like a movie that's historically accurate, and that means you're glorifying Hitler. So there's a really low kind of a bar here for what constitutes glorifying Hitler. Anyway, we're focused on that rather than Sean Diddy. You know, it's kind of like, I think it's also Bill Burr. Was it Bill Burr who said, he talked about the McDonald's conspiracy. He said, you ever realize anytime the government messes something up, McDonald's has a new sandwich, you know, some big scandal, suddenly the McRib's back. It's kind of like that. Now, Kanye, as far as I can tell, kind of evolved from egomaniac, I'm a genius, I'm God, to I love Jesus, to I love porn, to Heil Hitler. We know when one of these major transitions took place, by the way. It took place back in 2016. Now, some of you might recall listening to the Secret Teachings when we covered this. In fact, some of you might have purchased my book, The Technological Elixir, where I described this story in the music section at the end of the book. Where Kanye West in 2016, this is the era of the changing political world after Obama, of course, where Hillary Clinton loses the election. This is around 2016, where he stops a concert and just suddenly says, I got to speak to you people. And he tells them something to the effect of Google lied to you, Facebook lied to you, radio lied to you. He brings up Zuckerberg, he brings up Obama, he brings up even, I think, Jay-Z as well, you know, Jehovah, God. And what he said was true. I mean, Google was curating their algorithm, their search results for politics, for history, for other things. Facebook was running social experiments on people over a decade ago. We talked about that here on the Secret Teachings before it was popular. And we know that virtually everything you hear on radio, I mean, even in the alternative world, it's a lie. And I love how the conservative media is falling apart over Ben Shapiro and Mark Levine right now. That is really good stuff to watch. Like if I could eat popcorn, I would have a big bowl of popcorn as to watch that whole thing unfold. That's some good stuff. That's classy entertainment right there. But radio lied to you too. And almost instantly, the tour was canceled. And he was hospitalized with a series of different things. It was a medical emergency, then he was exhausted, or maybe it was he's exhausted, then it was a medical emergency. Maybe they're one and the same thing, but they were reported on separately. Like, he's just exhausted. That's why he started saying Google lied to you. Because anytime anybody points out, oh yeah, Google manipulates their search engine. Come on, you're just exhausted. That's the problem. And then it's a medical emergency, and then it deteriorated into a psychiatric emergency, and he was taken to UCLA. Now, I thought, that's interesting, because UCLA was home to Dr. West, Dr. Jolene West, which is also why I've done a show relatively recently called Kanye Jolene West, which you can find on our Spreaker page. Well, that means Apple, etc. It's also on our website for subscribers. I'll also put that as a best of next to this show in the archive so that you can listen to that show after this show. Kanye Jolene West. I thought it was a clever title. People didn't understand it. Somebody asked me, they said, oh, you're talking about Kanye West. His name's not Jolene. It's like, it's a play on words. Dr. Jolene, or play on names, Dr. Jolene West's infamous psychiatric experiments for the CIA, among, the whole MK Ultra experiment, the prisoners of war who chose to not come back to the United States. Jolene West studied them. This was weird because, I mean, he could have been taken to UCLA because they have a really good program there for people that have psychiatric problems. But why do they have a really good program there? It's because of people like Dr. West, because of the CIA, et cetera. And part of those experiments focused on splitting personalities, which is a common theme that you see in the music industry. Kanye then emerged. Remember this? Kanye emerged with blonde hair after that. He actually met Trump not too long after. I mean, maybe he met him before, but he met Trump not too long after that. And I remember watching Kanye West stand next to Donald Trump and seeing that he looked like I mean, I always said it looked like he had a lobotomy. He came out of the hospital looking like, well, you can see it on your screen, looking like this, the blonde hair. And then he proceeded later to dye his hair blonde pink, I think it was, or something like that. It was like a pinkish color. Here's the image of him standing next to Trump after he gets out of the hospital. I just thought he looked kind of out of it. That was one of the original images that I had seen. So I thought that was, I thought the whole thing was weird. UCLA, then he comes out with blonde hair and then he dyes it's like yellow pink or something. And I thought, that has the telltale signs of split personalities. I don't know if they gave him a lobotomy, if electroshock, if they put something in his head, like Amanda Bynes. I don't know what they did to him, but I think they did something to him in the hospital. Now, those of you who have read, or if you've listened to this show, but those of you who have read Strange Scenes Inside the Canyon by Dave McGowan are really familiar probably with how artists and many social movements are often started by or heavily influenced by the military and intelligence community. There are endless examples of this. This is true from music to UFOs. And that's also something Kanye tapped into in 2011. He was into UFOs and aliens. And he did a song with the woman who we call an astronaut, Katy Perry. Remember Katy Perry and Kanye West teamed up and they did a song called E.T. That's right, E.T. Remember that song? I remember when this song came out. I was in one of my classes in film school. This was like 2009, 10, whenever the song came out, 2010 or something, 11? Come on, 11? Yeah, 2000. Okay, so 2011. I was in my I guess maybe it was like the last couple of months of school because I only went to school for 2 years to get my degree, 2009, 10, 11. So this must have been toward the end of my schooling. But I remember somebody I knew who helped me get into radio, actually, where he had a show and I got into it with radio with him by happenstance. He came and he said, "You got to watch this video. You got to watch this video." And he pulls it up and he shows me the video of Katy Perry as an alien. And it's really weird. At the end of the video, there's a scene where there are sunglasses and a bird that are in these little plastic boxes. And it's very, very similar to what we saw at the Denver airport. I did shows on this a long time ago, basically about an extinction level event in the future. And in the song, not that this is important necessarily to tonight's show, but in the song, there's a line where Katy Perry says, "You're from a whole nother world, a different dimension," which is another kind of a reference to the idea that, Kanye is a god in the same way. There's a lot of this in the rap industry. For example, Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne very, very, very famously, has a lot of references to aliens or to something, to that effect. And of course, Lil Wayne, I think there was a conspiracy that he himself was an actual alien. He's like E.T. or something. I was kind of like I like Lil Wayne a lot more than Kanye West in terms of his music. But anyway, point is, from a whole other world, another dimension. That's because he's not human. He's a god. He's a genius. He's Jesus Christ. He's not human. Okay, so that's going back far. That's the history of Kanye. He's gone through these transitional phases or periods. When you listen to him talk outside of all this, he just kind of sounds like a relatively reasonable person. In the same way that if you listen to a Hitler speech that's translated, it actually doesn't sound that crazy. And I've heard people say, Why would you read Mein Kampf? Because I want to read what Hitler actually wrote. Well, that book's just really it's hard to understand, right? Well, yeah, but that also depends on your level of historical knowledge. It depends on the context you have for what that book is. You could say the same thing about any book. I mean, try to read The Secret Teachings of All Ages and have no idea what you're talking about. You'll put it down in the first page. You'll be so lost. You'll be gone. It'll fry your brain. Try reading The Golden Bow. Try reading anything by Joseph Campbell. Try reading Carl Jung. There's a whole long list. It'll fry your brain if you have no context for it. So yeah, but I want to read what they actually said. I want to read what people actually wrote, not what I was told that they wrote. But it's almost like can't do that. You can't do that. Don't talk about it. Why? No, I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it. Okay, I'm going to read it. And yes, also Britney Spears, Hannah Montana. Remember Miley Cyrus? I used to do shows on the blonde hair thing all the time because the Marilyn Monroe sex kit mind control motif. What was the show Hannah Montana? It was Miley Cyrus, whose real father said that she had handlers and he couldn't get access to her. Miley Cyrus, who played a pop star when she put on the blonde wig. So she would put on the blonde wig and she'd become Hannah Montana. And she'd take off the blonde wig and she'd go back to being Miley Cyrus. Remember that show? That's essentially what I'm talking about. That's it. That's the blonde hair motif. It's the same thing, yes, with Britney Spears, who still has breakdowns. I mean, can you really blame Britney Spears? I mean, remember we played on the show her statement to the judge in the case of her conservatorship, where she sounds very reasonable, very logical. And she's sitting there and you read the articles and the whole transcript. They drugged her. They took the door off of her room. They were monitoring everything that she did. They put her on birth control. Why? They didn't let her have the boyfriend or have relations with whoever she wanted to. They put her on birth control. And I noticed that nobody pointed out the fact that kind of sounds like some Kathy O'Brien shit, man. They put her on birth control and then they just probably farmed her out as a sex slave. So, if you've been farmed out in that way and drugged your whole life and you've been the victim of that by your father to some extent, it's probably going to mess you up. I don't think it's weird that she's dancing on boats in a bikini or playing with knives. I think that's pretty rational. Actually, I think that's probably one of the better things that could have happened based on the way that she was treated. And we could talk about people like Amanda Bynes, who was probably, although I don't know for sure, but based on that documentary, probably molested horribly at Nickelodeon. And then she grew up and said they put a microchip in my head, and then she had her hair dyed. And remember that? Amanda Bynes said they put a microchip in her head and they're telling her what to do. And we know that technology exists. It's like we pretend like it's some kind of just wacky conspiracy. No, that technology. Look at the story of what was the other guy? The naval yard shooter, Aaron Alexis. This is my elf weapon, and they're beaming signals into my head and telling me what to think. They have that technology for advertisements. Of course, they have that technology to do this kind of thing. So anyway, whatever the story is with Kanye, okay, whether the influence is directly coming from military intelligence, or he's breaking that influence and having kind of a Britney Spears-esque breakdown, or maybe he really is a genius. Frankly, I think he's a pretty smart guy. He's probably smarter than I am. I think you can't get to that level without at least being somewhat intelligent. And there's a lot of rappers in particular who you might think are stupid, and then you listen to them speak and they're really, really smart. I think he's probably a really smart guy. In fact, I would love to meet Kanye West. I would love to have an interview with Kanye West, but I'm a nobody in comparison to the social media trendy people that get paid to do the kind of thing that they do. But I have no issue with if I saw him in Tokyo, I'd say, hello, Kanye, how are you? Would you like to do a radio interview? I don't have an issue with Kanye West. I don't know what the problem is what the problem people have with him is. He said Google lied to you, and he lost pretty much everything. And it was true. Google did lie to you. So did Facebook. And you'll notice that besides the catchy hook to Heil Hitler, the song, he says things that, like, he's a cuck and he likes when people have sex with his woman. And I don't like it. I don't really care for it. But I think it's kind of catchy. They don't understand the stuff I say on Twitter. Heil Hitler, Heil Hitler. It's kind of catchy. But I don't think the song's that impressive. And you got others that are saying it's really impressive because it starts a conversation. It's like, well, I mean, yeah and no. It doesn't really start a conversation as much as it starts controversy. And maybe that's the whole point of the music. Maybe the intention was to have controversy. Maybe the intention was to prove everything that he's been saying. And what he's been saying are things like, well, there's a powerful cabal of Jews that run the music industry, and they determine what is playable and what's not. And they also determine what, the image of the black man is. He couldn't be any more correct about that. That's just 100% accurate. And the fact that we looked at that resolution earlier, resolution from the U.S. House of Representatives 352, and we looked at the definition by the State Department, DHS, and Department of Justice on what constitutes anti-Semitism. Not to mention that H.R. 867 anti-boycott Israel bill. Remember that? I think I should show you that really quick before we proceed. The IGO Anti-Boycott Act that never passed because it was pulled, and all the pro-Israel, America first, America second people suddenly were American heroes because they pulled the bill. They're not going to vote for it. Well, I want you to look at your screen really closely because this is the bill. This is what it says. See that? HR 867. This is the bill. But you'll notice that another bill with the exact same name, IGO Anti-Boycott Act, but with a different resolution number, 3016 instead of 867, has the literal same text. And you'll notice that this particular bill, which was introduced by the same person, Michael Lawler, see that? Already passed the House. See that? That's called a scam. And that's the same scam they're running now, separate note, with the White House broke ties with Netanyahu. The White House is doing their own thing. They lifted sanctions on Syria, which makes sense now because Israel runs Syria. And you're going to make Syria part of Greater Israel, so of course you're going to lift sanctions. And they're really upset about it. Don't you lift those sanctions? You didn't ask us. And it's so ridiculous now that you even have InfoWars people that are screaming about how much Israel controls our government. I'm like, whoa, I didn't think I'd see Owen Schroyer and Alex Jones screaming about that, although Alex did used to talk about how Israel was instrumental in 9/11. But anyway, the point is, that's a scam. It's called a PSYOP. It's called PR. And that level of manipulation, that level of psychological distortion, I think is, in a positive way, at play with the Heil Hitler song, because it's not really an impressive song. It's not even a long song. It doesn't really say anything except I like when people have sex with my woman or something. And then it's Heil Hitler. And you got people online that are just in their cars, or it's actually, I saw a video over in, I think it was Thailand, where people are dancing and having a good time to this music. Some people had Hitler masks on, which is just really funny. And we're going to get to that here in a little bit. Kind of the whole point of tonight's show, what I really think about this song. And I think it's an important perspective, not because it's my opinion, but just because I think it's a neutral perspective, and it needs to be said that ultimately it makes a mockery of Hitler, and it makes a mockery of Nazis. And it's kind of like with Seinfeld, or with like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where these aren't good people. Like, nobody on Seinfeld is really a good person. They're psychopaths. So when they do something psychopathy, it's not something you're supposed to emulate. Same with Sunny in Philadelphia. Oh, these are racist jokes. It's like, yeah, they're not good people. That's the point. You're not supposed to try to be what are those characters that Dee Reynolds always plays? Oh my God, I can't remember. I'm such a Sunny fan, but I can't remember the name. Oh, Taiwan Tammy. I thank you. Or the what's the Hispanic woman where they make her, they turn her skin brown and they put in the fake butt. God, I can't remember what that character's name is, but like, they're not good. You're not supposed to do that. That's the point. They're really bad people. That's the point. And that's, I think, what Heil Hitler does as a song. Like, it's a joke. It's not supposed to be like a good thing. I don't think. I mean, maybe it is, but like, that's how I interpret it. And I know that that's how most people see it. It's like a joke, whether they like it or hate it. It's kind of a joke. And I want to play you something that I thought was important. It's a minute long. Important because I've been saying this for 15 years. Some of you have been saying this for 15 years. Okay, it's one thing when the media, the mainstream media says or does something like this, but when you have a massive podcast like Joe Rogan saying something like what I'm about to play you, something has happened. Something has changed.
There's a benefit to just letting people talk. Like, let people say whatever the fuck they want to say, even if it sucks. This is the benefit of Twitter. But this is also the bad part.
I hope that you all can hear this on the stream. It might cut in and out, but hopefully it's playing well.
It's like the fucking song has so many millions of hits on Twitter. It's been banned from every platform.
Yeah.
But is it good to ban things from platforms, or is it better to let it be out there and let people talk about it? Because if you ban it, then people want to hear it more.
That's true.
And then it becomes more popular. And then it kind of supports what he says, which is that there's this concerted effort, if you talk about Jewish people, that they're going to remove you from everything, remove you from banking, which is what he's saying. They run everything.
Mm-hmm.
So if they didn't, like if it was just you were talking shit about Puerto Ricans, look what happened to Tony. Nothing.
Yeah.
He's doing great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if there's certain people that you're allowed to pick on and make jokes about or mock or say something, and you can get away with it.
Yeah.
There's a double standard. And what Joe Rogan is saying is something I've said for a very long time, and others have pointed this out too. You're kind of proving the point. You make a song called Heil Hitler and it gets banned everywhere, and nobody wants anything to do with you, and you're not allowed to say those words, and it kind of proves the point. It does prove the point. He's right. Why do they keep crying out in pain as they strike me? All they have is censorship. All they have is anti-Semitism. You notice that if you have a song, example, remember Lil Jon and the East Side Boys? Yeah. I mean, they had some of those songs, it was just curse words for 5 minutes. That was it. And that was promoted and pushed. There might have been more of a conservative Christian crowd that was opposed to that type of music, but that was pushed by record companies. Totally fine. Look at what's on social media today. Drugs, violence, sometimes almost smut videos that are just like put right into your feed. You're like, I was looking up soccer and that and a porn video came up, or snuff videos even. I've seen things, I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's a snuff video. Like someone just dies on video. It's not maybe intentional, but like somebody gets run over by a car or a train or something, just right there. You can see snuff, smut, drugs. People can sell themselves online. All that's totally fine. There's no problem with that. In fact, you can even get online and say horrible things about every single group of people. Anybody. Puerto Ricans, as Joe Rogan said, Asians, Hispanics, Canadians, Americans, Europeans, any pretty much anybody. But if it's Jews, there's like a hard stop. And you can say the N word repeatedly. And as many have pointed out before me, the industry has gotten black people to adopt language that demeans themselves and others. They call each other the B word. and the N-word. And that's acceptable. But if you say Heil Hitler, in whatever the context is, then it's off limits. As we move into the final segment of tonight's show, I'm going to start putting up on the screen some of the comments that listeners are making in the chat room. I don't mean to neglect you in the chat, but this is primarily an audio show. But I will look at the chat room as the show goes on, and I'll start putting up some more comments so that we can have more of a direct interaction on the show tonight. So whatever the context is, you know, I think it's just kind of funny. I mean, really, because I've actually never met a legitimate, like, got to be careful which word we use because I don't know which one really truly applies. I met a real Nazi one time, and they weren't a Nazi anymore at that point. And they weren't a Nazi anymore because they realized what I had realized about Nazis. Most Nazis are like covered in tattoos, pumped full of heroin, and living in a basement. That's something that Hitler would have probably, I've always said, if you're a Nazi today, Hitler would have probably exterminated you because you were a drag on society, because you were a person who was so morally and ethically and physically and visibly corrupt. Like you were a disgrace. You probably would have been removed from society if we believe the whole narrative as it's sold to us. Like you'd have probably been put in a camp. So I don't know why they're Nazis. And then of course you get the red shirts and the tan pants and the black boots and the wash-off tattoos, which are the federal agents that go to Kohl's or Burlington Coat Factory and they get some uniforms to go out and protest and say, we're Nazis. I don't think you can even spell Nazi. You're a Fed. So I don't think that you're a Nazi. I don't think we don't even know what Nazis are. We're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But Hitler is off limits, no matter what the context, because even if it's in a positive context, there's a monopoly on that, like I said earlier. Slavery, suicide, drugs, mental illness, pornography, snuff, all of it. That's okay, but Hitler, no. And whatever your reasoning is to like this song or to dislike this song, people have extreme reactions to it. Some of you listening might be more like me and are kind of objective about it or try to be objective about it. But there's generally three kinds of people that like the Heil Hitler song. People who are tired of censorship, people who genuinely love Kanye for one reason or another, or they love Hitler for one reason or another, and people who also think it's funny. And to put it simply, Kanye was banned not for porn or saying he's Jesus or any of the other crazy stuff that he's done or said that should be seen as maybe immoral or indecent in a decent society. He was banned because he said something about Jews, and then he put out a song that says Hitler. Something that's really comical because I think he's about as much of a Nazi as he is a Christian. And that is not very much. I don't think he's a Nazi. That's insane. It's totally insane. I mean, does anybody find it strange that this controversy seems to also overshadow the Diddy scandal, who is essentially, and still is, essentially being protected by the media like Epstein? Kanye's bad for saying Heil Hitler, but Epstein, Diddy, and Jay-Z, they're good guys. We have to be fair to Jay-Z. The woman dropped the case against him for the rape. No big deal. But rather than talking about Diddy and Epstein and how Pam Bondi is clearly compromised, blackmailed, or working with those people in the intelligence community because she's doing a Groundhog Day thing. She's doing what did I say on the show the other night? She's doing a Mandela effect thing. Every day I wake up, they're going to release them. Didn't they do that yesterday? And they didn't release them, and they gave them to influencers. And they just all the same stuff we already knew. Oh no, they're going to release them. It's like every day I'm Bill Murray. I got to live the same day over and over and over and over and over again about these Epstein files. And then I got to hear from the people that defend the Trump administration that I'm wrong and Pam Bondi's the hero. No, she works for the same people that the rest of the administration works for. She works, I mean, clearly, obviously, she works for the same people the rest of the administration works for. And that includes people like Will Scharf and people like Stephen Miller, and people like John Thune, Kristi Noem, Lee Zeldin, Marco Rubio, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, Michael Walls, Elise Stefanik, Brian Hook, Howard Lutnick, etc. They work for the same people or the same kinds of people. But remember, Hitler off limits, Epstein, Diddy, that's okay. No big deal. Now, I want to comment on something here that I think is really, really important. It's critical, totally critical. The public glorification of Hitler or Nazis, like the constant use of such accusations for every political issue, is part of a historical straw man argument that has persisted since World War II. We don't even define what these terms mean, which is why we began tonight's show by doing that. We tried to define these terms before we got into this tonight. It's important because if we don't define the terms, we have no idea what we're talking about. Now we're coming around full circle. What is a Nazi? It's a National Socialist. It has nothing to do with race. It has nothing to do with Jews. Ask Bernie Sanders. He's a National Socialist and a Jew. Or how Hitler was by no metric the most evil man in the 20th century. What are you defining that on? Statistical numbers? That's like leaving Michael Jordan out of the Hall of Fame. Doesn't make any sense. And Joe Rogan's also right about Heil Hitler being banned. It proves what Kanye has said about a cabal of powerful David stars controlling the music industry and image of the black man. Clearly, there are those very powerful Davinic interests, not Divinic, but Davinic, or really Ramphinic in the book of Acts. There are Davinic interests, Ramphanic interests involved in limiting and controlling who can talk about Hitler because it's a monopoly like the Holocaust industry. They own his image. They own the history, just like they own the image of the people that are signed in the music industry. Their worldwide universal contracts, basically the selling of the soul, figuratively, maybe literally. That's what it is. And they control the image of the black man as well. They control the image of the image of society as a whole. They control Hitler. They control Nazi. They control the swastika. I always like saying that kind of thing to liberals. What, so swastikas are bad? So you hate Native Americans? You hate Buddhists? A lot of Asia is Buddhist. You hate Asians and Native Americans? What do you mean? Well, they use swastikas all the time. Something to think about. So what exactly is a Nazi? Now that we've gone through this whole show tonight, what exactly is a Nazi? Anybody have any idea? Anybody have a clue? Anybody want to take a guess? Well, a Nazi is a National Socialist. Okay? If you're not a National Socialist, but you're accused of being a Nazi, you can't be that because you're not a National Socialist. And it's really just that simple. It's really just that simple. Historically, National Socialists, we know them as the Nazi Party in Germany. And they have some core political principles. And we should define what those principles are. This is what a Nazi, a National Socialist, actually believes as an actual, political National Socialist. They believe in authoritarian state control, a centralized hierarchical state led by a single leader, the Führer, with absolute authority, prioritizing state power over individual liberties. Sounds like the Democrat Party, sounds like the Republican Party to some extent. It also is economic interventionism. Economic interventionism means a mixed economy with state-directed industries, private enterprise subordinated to national goals and policies like economic self-sufficiency to reduce foreign dependence. The Democrats are right. Trump is kind of Nazi-y or kind of fasci, but it's actually a good thing if you want to make the right business deals and make the country wealthy and powerful. without really doing it in maybe the traditional Republican ways that the country was founded on. But, that is, it's true. Kind of Nazi, kind of fasci in a way. The National Socialist German Workers' Party. They believe in militarism and expansionism, emphasis on military strength, territorial expansion, and aggressive nationalism to assert dominance and secure resources. That's only true in context with the historical context of World War I and the land that was stripped away from Germany in World War I, even going back before that. That's the expansionism. It's kind of the same thing that Putin's been accused of, expansionism. Really, it's like taking land back and dealing with issues that are 100 years old in some cases, or maybe younger, maybe older. But it's okay if Israel expands. That's okay. Israel can expand into Syria, and we can pretend like Trump's not working with Netanyahu and he's dropping the sanctions, and it's all part of the game of 6D chess. Okay. They also believe in a form of collectivism, but see, National Socialism is a unique form of collectivism. It's kind of like what it's like to live here in Japan, where the collectivism, it's not necessarily subordination of personal interests. It's the conditioning of the public to believe that your personal interests should be beneficial to the community, and not in a communistic way, in the sense of like you keep yourself clean and healthy, and you keep the streets clean and healthy, and you keep society clean and healthy and safe. That's a very positive thing. And we should all, it's actually kind of Buddhist in nature, because we're all part of a collective spiritual consciousness, if you will. And we should do things that put us into alignment with the divine. Now, that's not the political Nazism, but like in terms of defining what collectivism is over and individualism in regard to Nazism, it's about the national community of a country. It's also, and this is what makes me a Nazi, hyper anti-communist. It rejects liberal democratic values like pluralism and individual rights in the sense that they are defined by modern scholars, because communism means nobody has any rights at all. So you can't define Nazism as anti-communism, and Nazism is like they don't believe in individual rights. It's actually kind of the opposite. They do believe in individual rights. Communism means everybody has everything in common. It means nobody owns anything, everybody's happy, and the world's really angry, and you have to do exactly what you're told when you're told to do it, or you disappear, which are the kinds of things that we're always told about Nazism. Oh, they're asking you for your papers. You mean like the real ID? COVID vaccine papers? You mean that kind of stuff that the Democrats pushed and the Republicans pushed? When I say it makes me a Nazi, I mean in the sense of being like hyper anti-communist, because I'm really, really anti-communist. Really anti-communist. But also, Nazism promotes traditional cultural values, heritage, mythology, fosters a unified cultural identity. And that means they reject postmodernism, which, yes, that would make me a Nazi, but I'm not. I'm more of like a constitutionalist. By the way, I read the Japanese Constitution. Fascinating. In the first couple of sentences, they actually just totally renounce war. Completely renounce war. It's really, really interesting. You should read the Japanese Constitution. They also have laws over here that mandate that schools have to have nutritionists to show kids how to eat. And that probably contributes to Japan having one of the best healthcare systems in the world. It's so good that Chinese actually routinely abuse it to come over here and to get free healthcare by exploiting their system, setting up fake businesses and such. But this is a whole nother subject. Okay. Point is, that's kind of what a Nazi is. Really has nothing to do with Jews, and it really has nothing to do with race per se, because unless you're defining racism as an overall overarching thing that can affect any community, because I mean, really, it never made any sense to me how the Japanese were honorary Aryans. I think that's a piece of propaganda that's been laid before us to explain why the Germans, who believed in white supremacy, not entirely accurate, would want to make an agreement with people that were probably the most genetically distinct people that you could find outside of white European Germans. So they just come up with the thing, oh, they honorary Aryans. Doesn't really make sense to me, in the same way that when they say, yeah, well, there's not really an extermination order by Hitler, but it was all in code. It's all in code. Yeah, it's all in code. I'm sure it's all in code. Everything's in code. They were proud of what they did, but it was all in code. Makes a lot of sense. Okay, now what is fascism? What is fascism? Okay, well, fascism is a cultural term that we use, like Nazi. We don't really define what it is. The definition of fascism, as coined by Mussolini, was the very opposite and antithesis of Marxism. In other words, Nazism was anti-communist, fascism was anti-Marxism. That's why the Marxists constantly use the term fascism to degrade their political enemies. What is fascism? It's corporatism, because it is a merger of state and corporate power. The United States is a fascist state, without doubt, because this country is run by corporations. And maybe whether it's the corporations that control the government that controls the corporations, or it's kind of like a mixture of both. The political collusion of big corporations, like the ones that were allowed to stay open while their competition were shut down during the pandemic, that was fascism. And the Democrats and the Republicans supported it and backed it and defended it, and to this day would still defend it. That was the only option we had. We had to do these things to protect people from the virus. I mean, that's the most basic definition of Mussolini's fascism, is letting Walmart stay open and shutting down mom and pop stores. The simplest definition is government colluding with pharmaceutical companies to lie to the American public about side effects. That's fascism. And I want to make that really, really clear. But see, here's the problem when we use these words. When somebody like the Democrats use the term fascism, they don't use it properly. So like they're right, but not for the right reasons. And then the Republicans reject those terms because they say, well, we're not a fascist. And it's like they're wrong for the right reasons, because they're not really fascist in terms of how they define it, but they are fascist in terms of how they act. And so are the Democrats, which is kind of like what we saw with this recent, I'll have to show it to you again because I think it's hard to believe without seeing it, but this is what we've had with this recent executive order from the White House delivering favored nation prescription drug pricing to American patients. Oh, it sounds like a really great idea. Did you read it? Well, it says that Americans pay 3 times more for medicine made in the same factories that they sell overseas cheaper. Americans should get the best deal. Who can argue with that? But if you read the rest of it, it says that the Secretary of Health and Human Services shall facilitate direct-to-consumer purchasing programs for pharmaceutical manufacturers to sell their products to American patients at the most favored nation price. In other words, getting rid of pharmacies and insurance companies and selling directly to the American people. Sounds like a really good idea, doesn't it? And then you look back about a week before that was signed by the president on May 12th, and you get May 5th, an order from the White House to remove regulatory barriers in domestic pharmaceutical manufacturing. Things that we know don't make us healthier because we're the sickest in the world and we consume the most drugs. So that's pharmaceutical industry collusion with government. And then the pharmaceutical companies come out and say, oh, we don't like what Trump did. No, they do. Just like when the bankers said, oh, we don't want the Federal Reserve Act, but they do because they work with the people in Congress, and they also passed it during Christmas. And that's a whole nother subject and a whole nother story. But fascism, that's what fascism is. The deifying of Fauci was fascism. The deifying of Trump is fascism. The deifying of Netanyahu is fascism. Biden, it's fascism, but it's not maybe the fascism that you think it is. Call it fascism, call it Marxism, whatever you want to call it, and put those two things into conflict with one another. The people lose regardless. Usually the people lose. The radical left and the radical right that want war with Russia over Ukraine, or they want war with Russia over Iran and Israel, or all the people that say we should lock up the deep state without trial, put soldiers on the street to deport illegals, go to war with Iran because it's necessary, or break ties with Netanyahu while secretly pushing for war. I mean, which is all part of PNAC and the Project for the New American Century, which, yes, were written by like all those articles calling for war in Iraq and all those babies in incubators. Most of them were written by Jewish authors or Jewish journalists who worked for Israel. So, I mean, that Kanye's right about this. The passions of the people swept up by hero worship, resistance to manufactured tyrants, and with the emotional appeals to foreign nations that they'll never visit, That's the explosive material, and the propaganda is the trigger to create perpetual death and destruction. And fascism is the complete opposite of Marxist socialism. Benito Mussolini wrote this in an article co-authored with Giovanni, a guy named Giovanni, I think it was Giovanni. He said, fascism is the complete opposite of Marxism. The materialist concept of history of human civilization can be explained simply through the conflict of interests among the various social groups and by the change and development in the means and instruments of production. Fascism now and always believes in holiness and in heroism, that is to say, in actions influenced by no economic motive, direct or indirect. And if the economic conception of history be denied, according to which theory men are no more than puppets, carried to and fro by the waves of chance, while the real directing forces are quite out of their control, it follows that the existence of an unchangeable and unchanging class war is also denied, the natural progeny of the economic conception of history. And above all, fascism denies the class war can be the only preponderant force in the transformation of society. So it's inherently anti-Marxist. And I mean, really, the bottom line is whatever definition you have, if being anti-communist makes me a Nazi or being anti-Marxist makes me a fascist, then like, I guess by definition, yeah, I'd be those things, but I'm not those things. I don't believe in hero worship. I preach against it. We shouldn't be worshiping an individual. We should be honoring the rule of law. And that's why I don't like the weird Hitler worship. I don't agree with that either. I think it's silly. Oh, but you don't think Hitler was such a bad guy. Well, I don't think he was the worst guy. I'm pretty sure Jesse Owens was snubbed by the White House and not Hitler. And I'm pretty sure that, well, Hitler probably had certain things that he had done that were probably good. In fact, I know that many things Hitler did were good. And he's probably one of the most mischaracterized individuals in history. But, at the same time, he's also a monster. And although I'm anti-communist, which makes me a Nazi, I'm also not a Nazi because that's stupid. And I don't believe in the other political principles of Nazism. I'm a constitutionalist. You see, there's like certain things you can and certain things you can't talk about. And there's certain things that when you do talk about them, you have to talk about them in a specific way. And when you talk about them in that specific way, you have to have the right tone too. And even then, it doesn't even matter, because if I say I'm a Nazi, people just cut that clip. See, Ryan admitted he's a Nazi. Did you listen to the context of what I said? And even if I were an actual Nazi, I have every right in the world to be an actual Nazi. I have every right in the world to say Heil Hitler. I have every right in the world to wear a swastika. I have every right in the world to say Sieg Heil. I have every right in the world to do any of those things. You know why I know I have that right? Because I can do that with anything else. I can say I love Mao. I can say I love Stalin. I can say that I love the concentration camps the Chinese run today. I can say that I love the Japanese experiments on people, the rape of Nanking and the biological experiments. I can say pretty much anything about any other group of people, and it's completely fine and acceptable. And in fact, if I say I love communism, I'm kind of applauded, like, oh, that's brilliant. He's such a scholar. He understands communism. It's just the way of the future, and people applaud it. Hell, go to any liberal bookstore. They've got. It's always funny because it's capitalism, but they're always selling you like the Communist Manifesto. They've got like a Karl Marx coffee mug with the planks on it. They've got the Karl Marx doll. When you pull the string, he says, "I'm not a Jew." He was a Jew. And that's why a lot of people think, along with the fact that the Communist Party, the Soviet Union, was primarily Jewish at the top. So people think communism is Jewish because it means that there's a very small elite that get to have all the power and wealth and control, and everybody else works for them, which is, the idea of like the Goyim and the Gentiles being servants to the chosen Jews. But then you have to remember that Jews are all of us, and the chosen people are all of us. We're all God's chosen people. And if you understand those things, the whole narrative kind of falls apart. And that's why you need 2 hours to investigate this kind of stuff or more, because when you do that kind of a thing, it helps to open up the conversation and explain away maybe confusion or inconsistencies that we would otherwise have. And that's why we take the entire show. And that's why before I get to the comments, I'll close with this statement. I don't know what Kanye is. I mean, frankly, I think it's gold digging. I think he's tapping into the Hitler market, which is emerging. Plain and simple. A friend of mine told me that a couple years ago about TikTok. Hitler's really big on TikTok, and now it's emerged into Stu Peters, and it's emerged into Nick Fuentes, whatever his name is, which I agree with some of the things they say. I just don't agree with the way that they say it. But hey, if you want to be white, be white. I don't know what that is. I don't know what white is. I've got Native American in me. I've got English in me. I've got German in me. I mean, are the Germans even technically white historically? I don't know. Like, even we say Middle Eastern, like Iranians are not Middle Eastern. They're Asian. In fact, if you cut the world down the center, a lot of the Middle East is not just the Middle East, it's the East. And even parts of the Western world that you would never imagine are actually it's like, where do you put the dividing line, and what do these terms mean? And it's so weird. I want to go to the core, the source. I want to go to the root of all this. I want to figure out what's happening here, what it means. Like, what is white? Greeks weren't white. So you can't have white Western Christian civilization based on a philosophy that came from a non-white people around the Mediterranean. You can't. Jesus was not white himself. It was also Christianity is part of an Eastern religion. It's not Western. But then what is Western? I don't know, because China's in the West from where I'm sitting here right now in my studio. So I don't know. I'm a human. Yes, I'm a human. I think Kanye is probably just a gold digger. That's really, frankly, what I think about the whole thing. All right, let's get to some of the comments on the YouTube stream. And since we have so many people in here, maybe we'll keep the show going a little bit longer. For those of you on the audio stream, feel free to continue listening. You won't be able, obviously, to see the comments, but you can go watch the video after this. There's a link below the archive show. You can click the link and go watch it on YouTube. But I can't do this every week, because if I do this every week with every show, I don't make any money at all, because I don't even take money from YouTube. So if you want to support the show, before we get to these comments, tstradio.info, buy a book, subscribe to the archive. You can also use PayPal. There's a link, a new PayPal link. It's a personal link, not affiliated with the show, in the comments below the YouTube video or the description of the show. And we have a PayPal link there, and PayPal's also, not PayPal, Cash App is also on our website, tstradio.info. That's tstradio.info. Let's go through some of these comments. I mean, there are probably thousands in here. I like the show to be a presentation. I like the show to be almost like what would you call it? Presentation. Maybe that presentation is a good word. Presentations. I don't like to just look at the comments the whole time, but we're going to spend some time here looking at the comments now. And there's so many of them. I'm not even really sure what to start clicking on. Huey says he's listening on Spreaker. Great. Zoe, your voice is strong and great. Thank you. I don't really think my voice is that great, but some people do. Sometimes I'll listen to my own show, not because I like it, but because it puts me to sleep. I think my voice is boring. Antonio says, don't forget Bush, Reagan, Clinton, Obama. Of course I can't forget these people. Of course I can't forget Bush. See who else we have in the chat. Let me try to scroll back through. We have, Flux is here. Flux is always commenting on the show. Thank you for tuning in, Flux. PT is here. Hey, look who else is here. Good friend of mine. Night Watch in 8. You got to check out his show. You should post your show link in the YouTube channel chat here. You should absolutely post your show there. Very objective investigation into, a lot of the same stuff that I talk about, which is why we know each other. We should do a collaboration soon. I've been trying to get him on the show. Trying to get you on the show for how long now? Come on the show. Please come on the show. Zoe says, at least that's what I learned in school books back many, many years ago before wokeism was a thing. I'm not sure what they're referring to. Antonio, the U.S. government, Nazis, they took a lot of Nazi ideas, modified them, hired them. See, that's a whole other thing. It's not just Operation Paperclip. It's also what we learned from the communists in Russia, the communists in China. And then that's also part of Jolene West's work, which went into UCLA, which is where Kanye was taken when he had his little breakdown about 9 years ago. And then he started saying he believes in Jesus and porn and Hitler. And I don't know if he's a gold digger or if he's influenced by some form of mind control or what the situation is, but that's, again, why we did tonight's show, which for those of you who have not looked at the show promo tonight, tonight's show is called Not Saying He's a Gold Digger. Not saying he's a gold digger. Kanye, Jesus, Hitler, West. I don't know what he is. People say he's all kinds of things. It's like they say I'm all kinds of things, but I like little plays on words like that. All right, let's see what else we have in the chat room here. I apologize for having so many comments and not getting to them. Thank you, Sunspots. I appreciate that. Let's see what else we have here. Zoe says, Kanye West being blonde sounds like the same kind of a thing with Britney Spears when she was having her crazy episodes and the shaving her hair. Also, Miley Cyrus went through that platinum blonde period. Seeing the coincidence. Yes, exactly. That's all part of the same thing we talked about. Absolutely. Without doubt. I'm scrolling back through the comments. Oh, we have Tyler is here. Bad Whiskey is here. Chad is here. Yes, the Alex Jones freakout was epic. That's the Alex Jones I used to watch for entertainment. Let's see what else. I'm not very good at bringing up the. I'm not very good at bringing up all the chats. I'm more of like a presenter rather than someone who interacts very well with a bunch of other things going on. Jackie, I'm so sorry, Miss Jackie. I'm assuming Jackie's still here. Jackie, we live in a world where porn and the abnormal is accepted for all, yet having a thought too absurd and bad. Oh, and Noka was here too. I think they left a little bit ago. Zoe also said, I used to be your subscriber a few years ago, and I have a couple of your books. It's so good to see you and hear you. I still love your rationale and sense of in most topics. I do miss Jordan Maxwell. I do too. And miss your interviews with him. I wish he was still around and gave us his views on all what's happening now. Imagine what he would say. I think you're pretty close to what he was thinking. Oh, that's a very kind compliment. Still living in the United States, I've never seen a busy Buddhist temple. I don't think there's a lot. I think Buddhists are 1%. There's actually more Christians in Japan than there are Buddhists in the United States, despite the fact that there's a lot of Japanese living in the US and a lot of Chinese, lots of Chinese. But how do they determine those statistics? It's probably like 1 or 2%. It's probably not a lot. But if you go to a real Buddhist temple, the ones where they're not driving Bugattis, then yeah, it's a special place. Kind of like if you go to like a real Catholic cathedral, it's a real special place. Same if you go to a mosque or a synagogue. Been to a synagogue, but I just don't. They don't want me there. I know that, so because they're anti-Gentiles. Let's see. I'm not even sure what to click on, folks. I'm so sorry. There's so many comments. Maybe we'll go down here to the bottom. See if there's anybody else that I know. There's a bunch of people in here I haven't mentioned. So I apologize for that. Okay, here we go. Verbal Kent. What do you think has killed more people in the past 2,000 years, mosquitoes or the Catholic Church? Well, I think that they're not really different from one another. I'd say definitely the Catholic Church, because I don't really think mosquitoes through viral infection spread any kind of disease. I don't think that that's accurate. So definitely the Catholic Church. Although the Catholic Church is considerably rabbinic, if you will, as well. So I think it's a pretty good mixture of like the Abrahamic religions have killed a lot, and what they haven't killed, communists have killed. Let's just put it that way. I think that's the best way to put it. What else do we have in the chat room? Oh yeah, the Wallenberg family. I've heard about that. Several people have messaged me about that family, ultra wealthy. There are lots of things that I like with Kanye. I wanted to talk about Kanye again to do another show, but it has to come to me. I have to find something that I find is relevant and topical, and whatever. If that eventually comes up, then yes, I will. I don't have an issue talking about it. Just it has to come up. I do my show a lot different than what others do, so I don't want to just take that as a random subject that has no, I guess you could say no, there's nothing topical about it. If I could find something topical about it, then I'll talk about it. Rebecca is here. Rebecca Ann says, I started listening to this on the bus home. I miss seeing you in the neighborhood. I'm hoping that means the YouTube neighborhood, because I don't think I've lived in a neighborhood unless you've been stalking me. So there's a lot of comments in the chat room. There's so many to scroll back through. If you have a question about the show, or if you have a comment about the show, please share it now, whether you're on Facebook, X, or YouTube. I'm going to play a very brief, I guess kind of like a commercial break type of a thing. And it's about a minute. So please put your comments there and we'll go through them after this little tiny break. And then we will wrap up the show tonight. Okay? Please comment if you have comments or questions, and then we will wrap up the show. tstradio.info. That's tstradio.info. And we are going into overtime because there's so many kind people in the chat that we should get to everybody tonight if you have questions. All right, we'll be right back.
You don't see what.
Hey there, it's Ryan of TST Radio. I wanted to take a moment to thank you for supporting this show for 15 years to keep us independent of censorship, influence, and clickbait content. Here on TST, you will never hear AI-generated content, music, or scripted analysis. Unlike the left wing, right wing, paranormal wing, and conspiracy wing of media and influencing, nobody pays me to influence my show, nor am I an influencer or content creator. I am simply trying to preserve the tradition of thought-provoking radio. And you can continue to be a part of that at www.tstradio.info, where TST Radio can be listened to 7 days a week with a large backlog of shows. If you'd like to get the advertisement-free version of the shows with documents, montages, books, and more, it's also on the website, tstradio.info. Thank you for 15 years of support. I look forward to another 15. All right, that's our short little break. I was waiting for anybody to post comments on YouTube or through Facebook or X. Huey asks me an unrelated question. Any thoughts on an ancient advanced civilization? Many thoughts, and I've done many shows on that subject, but for time's sake, not relevant to tonight's show. But if you check out the archive at tstradio.info, there is a massive backlog of episodes, many of which I do discuss things like that. If you want to email me, rdgable@yahoo.com, I can find an episode or two where I talk about it, and I can send it over to you, Huey, tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. Thank you, Antonio, for listening and for kindly commenting on the show. I guess nobody else has any comments. Nobody else has anything to add, which is totally fine. I'm glad that you listened. I'm hopeful that you will share the show, and maybe you'll listen again, help us out with the ads, or subscribe. Remember, all the links are below on YouTube, Cash App, PayPal for supporting us directly through subscribing or listening to the free archive. Also, Early Girl is here doing homework but listening in the background. Interesting info. We'll listen again when I can listen more closely. A lot of people do that, and you have to do that because the show's so long. You have to listen to the whole thing, usually sometimes more than once. All right, well, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of time to put together these shows, a lot of mental energy, a lot of preparation, And if I didn't have people like you who tuned into this show via audio or via video, when we do these kinds of video shows, I wouldn't be able to do them. I'm humbled. I'm honored by so many people tuning in and listening. And I want to thank you all for supporting this show and what I do. If you're on YouTube, remember that there are Secret Teachings episodes Monday through Friday. People ask me, you're not on YouTube, so you haven't done a show for a long time. I've been doing a show every night, Monday through Friday, for years and years and years. You just have to go to one of the platforms and get it. It's all linked up on the website. It's all linked up in the show description below. All right, if nobody else has any questions, I do think I made things pretty clear. Yes, Flux, I think I made things pretty clear. Hopefully so. And I'm hoping that people don't have any questions because I made them very clear. If you have your own opinions, though, you can email them to me. If you think of something later, rdgable@yahoo.com. That's rdgable@yahoo.com. One more time, rdgable@yahoo.com. tstradio.info has the full list of shows. It looks like this if you're watching all the shows. Best ofs on the weekend. I'm even uploading the live stream videos, just the audio, into the archive so that little bite-sized clips of the show, you can listen to those. But we are completely independent. Nobody tells us what we can and can't do and what we can and can't say. Rabbi Shmuley is not standing over my shoulder. You see that? He's not under the table. He's not up above here. So nobody's telling me what to do or to say. It's just me. And I am here tonight with you. One of our first live video shows ever, but first live shows in a very long time. Hopefully, if there's a good enough response from this show, we can do this again. Until next time, I'm not saying he's a gold digger. Kanye, Jesus, Hitler, West. He's definitely not messing with any broke, what, because Christians ate up the Christian angle, and the Hitler people are eating up the Hitler angle. So he knows who and what he's messing with. Put it that way. Keep it simple. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Again, tstradio.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. As always, stay safe, stay informed, stay healthy, and I will talk to you on the next broadcast. This music is from White Bat Audio. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend. I'll speak with you on Monday.